Zuba stood in the hallway, barefoot and shaking, as the sound of her husband and mother-in-law laughing echoed through the walls. About her. We'll replace her before her next birthday, they said. So she wiped her tears, walked away quietly, and began planning something they would never forget. Zuba had spent the whole day cooking, cleaning, and making sure everything was perfect for her husband's family. She didn't complain, even when her feet hurt and her back ached. She only wanted to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law. When everyone finally sat down to eat, she quietly stepped away to catch her breath. That's when she heard it. Voices. Laughter. Her husband's voice, then his mother's. They were in the sitting room, talking low, but not low enough. She moved closer, behind the wall near the hallway, and froze. At first, she thought they were just chatting, but then she heard her name, and then the words that made her knees weak. We'll replace her before her next birthday, her husband said, laughing. She won't even see it coming. His mother laughed louder. She's not a real woman, she's just something to manage for now. I already have someone better in mind for you. Zuba pressed her hand to her mouth, stopping a sob from escaping. Her chest tightened. Her heart beat fast. Not from anger, but from deep, aching pain. They were planning to throw her away like she meant nothing, like she was just a thing. After everything she had done, after all the love she gave, they were mocking her behind her back. She stood there, barefoot, still holding the edge of her apron, listening to them laugh at her like a joke. The same people she had cooked for, served with a smile, loved with all her heart. They were ready to replace her, and they thought she'd never find out. Zuba didn't make a sound. She didn't burst in or cry or scream. She just turned slowly, walked away quietly, and went into the kitchen. She sat down, staring at her shaking hands. In that moment, something inside her broke, but something else woke up. They thought she was weak. They thought she would stay quiet forever. But they had no idea what she could become after hearing those words. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she stayed up, eyes wide open, heart full of fire, and began planning something they would never, ever forget. The next morning, Zuba acted like nothing had happened. She smiled. She served breakfast. She even laughed at her mother-in-law's dry jokes. No one could tell that something inside her had changed. But deep down, she was no longer the same Zuba. She had heard everything, and though it broke her heart, she decided to stay silent, for now. Not because she was weak, but because she wanted to see how far they would go. Suddenly, Ibuka started acting different. He was nicer, too nice. He brought her flowers, offered to help in the kitchen, even kissed her forehead in front of his mother. Zuba watched it all with a soft smile, but inside, she knew something was wrong. This wasn't real. It was all a cover-up. Maybe they thought if they acted sweet enough, she wouldn't notice the storm coming. But Zuba was watching, and she saw everything. It wasn't long before the truth started to peek through. One afternoon, she overheard a phone call. Ibuka stepped outside thinking no one was listening, but Zuba was close. His voice was low but nervous. "Are you sure it's mine?" he said. Then silence. "Okay, don't worry. I'll handle it. Just stay calm until I talk to Mama." Zuba didn't need to hear more. Her hands started shaking, so it was true. Someone else was pregnant, and it wasn't her. That evening, Mama Ibuka walked into the kitchen like a queen who had just won a prize. "We'll be expecting a baby soon," she said casually, slicing tomatoes like it was any normal day. "And this one, she's young, fresh and smart. A real woman. You should meet her, Lily. She's very modern." Zuba didn't answer. She just wiped the counter, even though it was already clean. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not in front of Mama Ibuka. Not anymore. The name kept ringing in her ears. Lily. That's who they were replacing her with. A young, flashy girl who probably had no idea she was walking into a house full of secrets and fake smiles. Zuba felt pain, but what hurt more was how casually they were trying to erase her, like she never mattered, like all her sacrifices meant nothing. Mama Ibuka didn't stop there. She laughed and said, "You can still stay here and help. Some women are just meant to serve, not be wives." Zuba smiled faintly and nodded. She didn't fight back. She didn't ask questions. She just folded her apron and placed it on the table. Because now, Zuba didn't need to ask why anymore. She already knew who, and she was going to make sure that both Ibuka and Mama knew that replacing her wouldn't be the win they thought it would be. Zuba didn't scream. She didn't throw things or ask why. Instead, she started smiling more. She began treating everyone with unusual kindness, even Mama Ibuka. She made their favorite meals, laughed at their jokes, and greeted them with a warm tone every morning. It confused them. Ebuka thought maybe she had accepted the situation. Mama Ebuka thought she had finally learned her place. They had no idea Zuba was only playing along. But behind that soft smile, Zuba's heart was burning. She cried only when no one could see her. At night, she sat alone in the room they once shared as husband and wife, staring at the ceiling, remembering how love had turned into betrayal. She wanted to scream, to break down, but she didn't. Instead, she began to plan. One evening, while Ebuka was out and Mama was gossiping on the phone, Zuba took out her old box of craft supplies. It was dusty, untouched for months, but it held the last pieces of herself she had kept hidden: creativity, patience, power. She began designing invitations with her own hands, cutting paper, decorating edges with gold ribbon, writing in neat, careful letters. Each card looked like it was made for a celebration. It was beautiful, but not joyful. The title on each card was bold: "A night to celebrate the ones who broke me." She addressed one to Ebuka, one to Mama Ebuka, and one to Lily, the girl who now walked in the shadows of her ruined home. Zuba asked a neighbor's boy to deliver the envelopes, sealed with care. She knew they would open them with curiosity, and they did. Ebuka raised an eyebrow when he read it, confused. Mama chuckled, thinking Zuba had gone mad. "She's finally lost it," she said, but they still agreed to come. After all, who wouldn't want to be celebrated? As the date approached, Zuba kept up her act. She cooked more, smiled more, even helped Mama pick out a new outfit. All the while, her heart was counting down, not to revenge, but to release. She wasn't just planning a dinner. She was building a stage, a moment, one where truth would no longer hide in the walls. On the night of the event, the house would glow. The table would be set with candles and clean plates. And in the middle of all the beauty, Zuba would be waiting, not to beg, not to cry, but to finally look them in the eye and show them exactly who they had broken and who she had become. This dinner wouldn't be about food, it would be about truth, and they would all be forced to swallow it. The evening finally arrived. Zuba had spent the whole day preparing the house, cleaning every corner, setting the table with her best dishes, and placing candles everywhere. The warm glow made the house look peaceful, almost magical. Soft music played in the background, and the smell of freshly cooked food filled the air. Everything looked perfect, but deep inside, Zuba wasn't doing this to impress anyone. She had a different plan. She stood by the door in a simple but elegant dress, her hair tied neatly, and her face calm like the surface of still water. But under that calm, her heart was steady and ready. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was doing. The first guest to arrive was Mama Ebuka, wearing her usual pride like a crown. She stepped in, looked around, and smirked. "Ah, finally, she's come to her senses," she said loudly, looking at the decorations. "Maybe she's finally accepted reality." Zuba just smiled and helped her to a seat. Next came Ebuka, acting as if everything was normal. He brought a bottle of wine and gave her a soft kiss on the cheek, like old times. "You look beautiful," he said, pretending to be the caring husband everyone once believed he was. And then came Lily, young, confident, and clearly pregnant. She walked in wearing a tight dress that showed off her belly like a trophy. She greeted everyone with a fake sweetness and glanced around the room like she already owned it. Zuba welcomed her with a warm smile and even helped her sit comfortably. They all thought this dinner was for peace, a night for forgiveness, a chance to move forward. Mama Ebuka whispered to Lily, "This is why patience wins. She knows her place now." Zuba heard it. She smiled again and went to the kitchen. A moment later, she returned with glasses of wine and placed one in front of each guest. The room was quiet for a second, filled with the clinking of glasses and fake small talk. Then Zuba raised her glass and spoke, her voice clear and calm. "Tonight," she said, looking each of them in the eye, "the truth will be served hot." Ebuka paused, confused. Mama chuckled and sipped her drink. Lily looked unsure, but Zuba's smile didn't fade. This wasn't a dinner of peace. It was the beginning of a truth they couldn't escape. She had waited for this moment with a heart full of fire and pain, and now they would sit at the table she prepared, not to eat her food, but to taste her truth. As everyone settled at the dinner table, laughter and light conversation filled the air. The food was served beautifully, and the wine flowed like it was truly a celebration. But one thing stood out: an extra chair at the end of the table. It was neatly arranged, with a plate, a glass, and a small name card placed in front of it. The name on the card read, Zuba, before they broke her. At first, no one paid attention to it. They thought maybe it was just decoration or a mistake. Mama Ebuka laughed and said, "She even set a seat for her past self. How dramatic." Zuba didn't respond. She sat gracefully and began to eat, watching everyone closely. After a few minutes, she put down her fork, wiped her lips, and gently tapped her glass with a spoon. The room went quiet. "I want to tell you all a short story," she said softly, smiling like she was about to share something light. They nodded, amused and curious. "There was once a woman," Zuba began, "who gave her heart, her time, her everything to a family that never truly saw her." Her voice was calm, but there was something in her eyes, something strong, something honest. She cooked their meals with love, cleaned their messes with care, and carried their burdens in silence. But no matter what she gave, she was never enough. They laughed at her behind her back, planned to throw her out like spoiled food. They didn't break her in one day. No, it was slow, cruel, silent. The room started to shift. Ebuka stopped chewing. Mama Ebuka narrowed her eyes. Lily blinked and looked down. "She heard them once," Zuba continued. "Heard them laughing, planning her replacement. And that night something inside her cracked. But instead of falling apart, she decided to show them something they never expected." She looked around the table, her eyes landing on each of them one by one. They thought they were smart, but she watched. She listened. She waited. Now the silence was heavy. No one moved. The sound of the spoon against the glass had faded, and all that remained was the truth in her voice. "That extra chair," Zuba said, pointing to it softly, "is for the woman I used to be, the one who begged to be loved, the one who cried when no one saw. She's not here anymore." Her words floated in the air like a spell. Now they understood. The story wasn't fiction. It was her. Every word, every tear, every piece. And she had just served them the truth, with no need to raise her voice or throw a plate. Just quiet, burning truth, seated right there at the table with them. After Zuba finished telling her story, the room stayed quiet. No one spoke. The air felt heavy, like something was about to happen. Everyone tried to pretend like they were still enjoying dinner, but the mood had changed completely. Zuba stood up slowly and walked to the corner of the room where a small box was sitting. She picked it up gently and placed it on the table. It was a mini projector. Ebuka raised his eyebrows. Mama Ebuka looked confused. Lily shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. Zuba pressed a button and a small screen lit up on the wall. "I told you a story," she said calmly, "but now let me show you the truth." The room went still as the projector began to play an audio clip. The voices were clear. It was Ebuka's voice first. "We'll replace her before her next birthday," he said, laughing. Then Mama Ebuka's voice followed, louder and crueler. "She's not a real woman, just something to keep the house clean for now. I already found someone better for you." Laughter echoed through the speakers, cold, heartless laughter. Zuba didn't say a word. She let the audio play. Ebuka's face turned pale. Mama Ebuka sat frozen, her mouth open. Lily, who had been smiling earlier, now looked down at her lap, her hands shaking slightly. Her cheeks turned red with shame. The audio ended. Silence filled the room. You could hear nothing but the ticking of the wall clock. Mama Ebuka tried to speak first. "That could be anyone. It's not even clear." Zuba raised her hands slowly. "It's clear enough. I know my own husband's voice. I know yours too." Ebuka tried to open his mouth, but nothing came out. Zuba looked at them, her eyes sharp but steady. "I lived in silence," she said softly, "but I recorded everything." Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. Every word felt heavy, like a stone hitting the floor. She turned to Lily, who looked like she wanted to disappear. Zuba didn't shout. She didn't blame her. But the look in her eyes said it all. "You're walking into the same fire that almost destroyed me." No one could deny what they heard. No one could erase it. Zuba hadn't just told them what they did. She showed them. And now, every fake word, every lie, every cruel laugh was right there on the wall for all to hear. She didn't need revenge with fists or fire. She used the only thing they never expected, proof, and with that, Zuba sat down again, her job done. The truth had spoken, and no one at that table could run from it anymore. Just as the room sat in the heavy silence, the sound of a knock echoed from the front door. Everyone turned their heads, confused. Zuba stood up without saying a word and walked calmly to open it. Standing there was a well-dressed man in a dark blue suit, holding a file in one hand and a soft smile on his face. "Good evening," he said politely. "May I come in?" Zuba nodded and stepped aside. The man entered the room confidently, his shoes clicking softly against the floor. Ibuka stared at him, puzzled. Mama Ibuka frowned. Lily looked more nervous than ever. Zuba walked behind him and spoke gently. "This is Azin, an old friend and a legal consultant." Azin turned to face the table and cleared his throat. He held up the file in his hand. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "I won't take much of your time. I'm here on behalf of Zuba. Months ago, she came to me with a story, one filled with pain, silence, and betrayal. Since then, she has been gathering proof. She recorded conversations. She wrote down dates, times, everything. She didn't come to me for revenge. She came for her freedom." The room froze. Ibuka blinked, confused. "Freedom?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Azin opened the file and pulled out a few papers. "Zuba started divorce proceedings 3 months ago. These are the documents confirming it. They include proof of emotional abuse, mental cruelty, and plans of betrayal. All legal, all documented." Mama Ibuka gasped loudly. "Divorce? But why would she—" Zuba interrupted her softly. "Because you didn't break me. You only made me stronger, and I refuse to spend another day with people who see me as less." Azin turned to Ibuka and calmly placed the papers in front of him. "You've officially been served." Ibuka's hands trembled. He looked down at the papers, unable to speak. His proud mother suddenly went quiet. Even Lily seemed like she couldn't breathe. Zuba didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry or explain herself. She just stood tall. "This dinner," she said, "wasn't for fixing anything. It was to show you I've already moved on. Tonight I don't ask for permission. I announce my peace." The guests sat in shock. No one saw it coming. Zuba, the quiet wife who once begged for love, had become the woman who wrote her own ending, and now she had spoken it out loud, with her voice, her proof, and her freedom. No one clapped, but deep down, everyone knew. Zuba had just taken her power back. The room was still frozen from the shock of the divorce papers when Zuba slowly turned her eyes toward Lily. The younger woman sat quietly, her hands on her stomach, her face pale. She had come expecting a warm welcome, a peaceful gathering, but now she looked like she wanted to disappear. Zuba looked at her with no anger, just a quiet truth in her eyes. Then she spoke in a calm voice that carried more power than shouting ever could. "Lily," she said softly, "he'll do to you what he did to me." Lily blinked, caught off guard. She opened her mouth slightly as if to speak, but no words came out. Zuba didn't wait for a reply. She simply turned and walked away from the table. Everyone watched her closely, wondering what she would do next. A few seconds later, she returned from her bedroom, holding a small metal key in one hand and a folder in the other. She placed the key gently on the table and looked directly at Ibuka. "You see this house?" she said, her voice steady. "It's mine. I paid for it. The documents are in my name." Then she held up the folder and flipped it open. "This business you brag about, the one that feeds this family, I built it. I registered it. I managed it. It's also mine." Ibuka looked shocked, like he had just been slapped with silence. Mama Ibuka's mouth dropped open. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked its usual fire. Zuba didn't even look at her. She continued speaking to Lily. "You walked in thinking you were stepping into a life of comfort, that I was just some weak woman he was leaving behind. But you never asked how that comfort was built. You laughed with them. You judged me without knowing my story." Lily lowered her head. She looked like a balloon that had just lost its air. Zuba placed the papers on the table, right next to the key. "Everything you see here," she said, "the walls, the chairs, the plates on this table, I bought them, I worked for them, and while you laughed, I was building." She looked around the room one last time. "I didn't lose anything tonight, but you all did. Respect, trust, and the chance to stand beside a woman who would have done anything for her family." Then she stepped back, her chin raised high, her heart finally light. Zuba had been treated like nothing for too long. But now, the truth stood taller than their lies. And every single person at that table knew she had just shaken the ground beneath their feet. After everything had been said and every truth laid bare, the room remained silent. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look Zuba in the eye. The same woman they once mocked, used, and ignored had now shown them a version of herself they never imagined. Zuba looked around the table one last time, her face calm, her heart steady. She had done what she came to do. "Thank you all for coming," she said gently, almost like a whisper. "Enjoy the rest of your night." Mama Ibuka sat stiffly in her seat, unable to speak. Lily looked down, her hands trembling, while Ibuka just stared blankly, still trying to understand how everything slipped out of his control. Zuba didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't slam the door. She simply turned and walked away. Not out of the house, but out of the woman she used to be. The one who stayed silent. The one who begged to be seen. The one who cried into her pillow at night, wondering if she was the problem. That Zuba no longer existed. Her footsteps were steady as she walked through the front door. Outside, a black car was waiting. Inside sat a woman with a laptop bag and a kind smile. A publisher Zuba had secretly met weeks ago. Zuba opened the car door, slid in, and shut it behind her. The car drove off slowly, leaving behind not just a house full of people, but a past she was finally free from. In her hand was a signed agreement. A book deal. Her story would be told, not as a pity tale, but as power, as truth. The title, "The Table I Set for My Betrayers." She didn't need revenge anymore. She didn't need them to say sorry. She had taken every moment of pain, every drop of silence, and turned it into purpose. And now, her voice would be heard by many, not through tears, but through pages. She looked out the window, a soft smile on her lips, not from happiness, but from peace. Because Zuba had finally left behind the version of herself they tried to break, and walked straight into the life they thought she could never build. And they would never forget the night she invited them to dinner, and fed them nothing but the truth. Months passed, but the memory of that night never left the people who had once sat around Zuba's table. While they tried to forget, the world was just starting to notice her. Zuba's face now smiled from magazine covers. Her story, once hidden behind kitchen walls and silent tears, had become a global conversation. Interviews, talk shows, and podcasts lined up to hear how she turned betrayal into boldness. A major streaming network even began turning her memoir into a drama series, and the trailer alone had the internet buzzing. Meanwhile, life for Ibuka was nothing like he had imagined. His charm faded quickly once the truth came out. Clients stopped calling. Friends kept their distance. Lily packed her things and left without a word. His mother, once loud and proud, fell silent with illness. Rumors spread. Their name, once respected, was now whispered with pity. But Zuba didn't dance on their downfall. She never threw their names in the mud. She never posted shade or wrote petty captions. She just moved forward with grace. In one interview, the host asked her, "What kept you going when everyone made you feel small?" Zuba smiled gently and answered, "They made me feel like I didn't matter. So I built a world where I did. No hate, no revenge, just quiet strength and a life well rebuilt." Because in the end, Zuba wasn't the woman they broke. She was the woman they couldn't. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll without sharing it. Tag someone who needs to be reminded. Your worth isn't given, it's built. Drop a heart in the comments if you believe silence isn't weakness. It's power waiting to rise. Follow for more stories that prove they might try to break you, but they can never become you.